Hello, and welcome to Journeys into Being, a new show co-produced by Amherst Media. My name is Renata Sylvia Pienkawa, and I'm your host. This program will focus not on doing, but on being, not on accomplishments, but on the joy of being fully present, not on what many people call success, but on our ability to be in flow, to be connected to each other and to the world through our very presence. Hello, and welcome to my show, Journeys into Being. My name is Renata Sylvia Pienkawa, and I'm a host of this program. But today we'll have a very different show. I'm happy to have with me here in the studio my brother, Pienkawa.
Welcome.
And we have also some portraits. This is my sister's self-portrait. When she was 16, she painted it. And also the picture of our dad when he was older. And today we will be talking about a voyage around the world that these two took many, many years ago, in 1973 and 1974, and we want to honor their contributions to sailing, and we want to also honor them because it is now 50 years since our sister Iwona died tragically after this voyage around the world, and it is also 25 years since our dad died of cancer. Both died in Poland. Both are Polish sailors, and we're very, very proud of them. So, Kaz, you're a sailor. You have sailed all your life. You have a sailboat. For me, it was a youthful connection with sailing. When I sailed with my sister, we raced small boats. And then since then, I sail once in a while, but Kaz has maintained the family hobby. And my first question for you is, what was so special about this race around the world that our sister and our dad participated in many years ago?
It was the first race around the world and around Cape Horn. Very difficult weather conditions in the Southern Ocean, which meant that the stress on those sailboats was incredible. Wind and water and cold and icebergs. So it created the extreme environment.
Yes, and this is the picture of the most dangerous Cape Horn that they also sailed by. So it was a very different route than just sailing around the world without Cape Horn, correct?
Yes, because by going to the Southern Ocean and then by circumnavigating the Earth through Cape Horn, the conditions were much more difficult. Cape Horn, because the two oceans collide, the Pacific Ocean and Atlantic Ocean, those are creating currents and winds and extreme conditions where it's not easy to go around the Horn.
And it's in South America.
It's the tip of South America, and it's very far to the south. So it's
Exactly.
So it's much closer to the South Pole, and that means that the journey becomes longer and
Exactly.
more difficult.
Exactly. So we have some, for those of you interested in some data, there are books that of course have been published about this voyage because it was the first in history voyage around the world that had 4 stops, right?
That it was a race. Yes, there were many voyages, before, but this was a race with 4 stops. It started in Portsmouth, England, and then the next stop was Cape Town. From Cape Town to Sydney, and from Sydney to Rio de Janeiro, and the end again in Portsmouth to complete the voyage around the Earth. The total length of this journey was 27,000 nautical miles.
Wow. And they did it in like something around 200 days, 203 days, which was amazing because you have to remember that Poland was behind Iron Curtain then. And for those of you who are younger, don't remember the Cold War, it really was difficult for Polish people and people behind the Iron Curtain, the countries that were in the Soviet Union bloc of influence, to participate in something like this. Politically was difficult, and also money-wise was difficult. Remember that Poland was very destroyed after World War II, so we didn't have the money that the Western countries had under the United States influence. So what boat did they decide to choose for this, and why? And can you give some specifications about what boat they were able to choose for this?
Yes, so they couldn't afford the new sailboat like many other crews. For example, the British had several boats, and one of them was specially made and created for this race. But the Polish crew here had a boat from 1959 at that point, so 14 years old, and it was already known to be very good for tough weather sailing. It was proven, and it was designed in the Polish shipyard, Gdańsk shipyard. So they decided to pick this boat named Otago, and they adapted it slightly for the race, but just the minimal conversions to make it even stronger and fulfill the need for this extreme weather.
That's incredible. And for those of you who love English literature, we have, and actually Kaz's daughter is studying to be an English professor, teacher. The name Otago came from the ship that Joseph Conrad was a captain on. He was a captain on that ship for 1 year. This was the only time he was a captain. And he, as many of you know, he's one of the foremost English language writers, and he learned the language at the age of 20. But that's just like a little aside. However, the name Otago is also one of the provinces in New Zealand. But it's a beautiful name, and you could see here that our sister's book has Otago in the name of the title of her book. So that's, I wanted to mention our the crew of this journey, and also more about our sister. But there was also another Polish. Surprisingly, there was another Polish sailboat. Can you tell us about that one?
Yes. So Otago was from the Gdańsk shipyard, the same one which later became known for the Solidarity movement and Lech Wałęsa. And the other shipyard was Gdynia shipyard, which sponsored the other sailboat and crew, Copernicus. Copernicus, a little bit smaller, but it participated and also finish this race, because that from the beginning it was known that because of the money and the expense, they would not be able to compete with the latest technology in the Western world at that time to build. So the whole idea of going and circumnavigating and finishing the race was already a big achievement.
Exactly, and you know the crew on Copernicus was very good. They were kind of almost semi professionals, but on Otago they were regular workers or engineers from the Gdańsk shipyard, except for our sister, who was still a high school student and was just accepted to the School of Architecture. That she postponed her attendance of the School of Architecture, and you would say, oh, you know, Iwona was taken on this voyage because she was the daughter of the captain, but not at all. Our dad really taught us that you have to be fair in life, you have to be tough, and Iwona had to compete with other women sailors. My dad wanted to take at least one woman sailor with him. He was always very conscious of giving women and girls a good chance to compete and to participate. However, at the end, Iwona won that competition because she was really the motor behind my dad to organize the sailboat, to organize the crew. So he felt like she really deserved to be taken on this voyage, even though he had difficulty with our mom to convince her to let Iwona go, because our mom, of course, was concerned about a young girl, 18-year-old teenager, to go on a tough voyage like this.
Tough voyage for 9 months. With a crew of other, 8 men.
Would you let your girl go?
So I have 2 daughters, Kimberly and Natalie, and they are close to age of Iwona, 21 and 20 right now. And I would not have easy decision to make. I'll most likely talk them out of going on a journey like this, because it is extremely difficult, and being stuck there for so many months, it requires the endurance and preparation, which not many people have. And back then, they didn't really know what it's going to be like, because it was the first time this race was organized.
Exactly. Yeah. I think I have 2 boys, Alex and Sam. They are a little bit older than Kaz's girls. One is mid-20s, one is around 30, and my older son did participate as a crew member on a tall ship. And I knew that even that was so difficult, and that was just in the summer. So can you imagine 9 months on a small sailboat, an 18-year-old girl with 8 guys racing and having just short stops after every leg? Like Kaz said, Portsmouth, first, then they went to Cape Town, South Africa, then Sydney, Australia, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and back to Portsmouth. And they had only like 3-4 days in each place, and they had to work day and night to prepare for the next leg and do their repairs. So they didn't see too much of the world. They did see some, but they didn't see too much, and they really, this was a test of their humanity, how to get along with each other. Mm-hmm. They were of different ages, different professions, different walks of life, and they did very well actually on Otago. But like Kaz said, on the Copernicus wasn't so.
Yeah, Copernicus was the crew of 5 men, closer to age, instead of a range of people like on Otago from 18 to 43. So on Copernicus, they were all very experienced captain level crew members, but they were also more against making decision, because they were all so experienced, so they were trying to have a more say of what they should do. And
exactly.
In this race, there are a lot of decisions to make. How to sail, more aggressively with more sail or less. If you put too many sails at once, too much of a sail surface, you can damage the sails, damage the actual masts and rigging, or you can also have some injuries, because somebody may be injured by the extreme sailing conditions.
Right.
But
you go faster then.
You go faster, but you have to make that decision. But yes. in this race, unfortunately, 3 people fell overboard, and they were never found.
Yeah.
And they died in this race.
Yeah. Yeah, may they rest in peace. I mean, this was the danger of it. And our dad, we're very, very proud of him, because he put the safety of the crew first. And also the getting along of the crew. So maybe this is a good moment to introduce the crew to you. So some of them have passed away, like our dad and sister, but there was a vice captain who was, I always joke, he was sort of a Mr. Spock to Captain Kirk, because our dad was a lot like Captain Kirk. He's a lot older on this picture. He was young. He was in his early 40s in this voyage. So our dad was very good captain, very personable. Of course, not perfect. Nobody's perfect, but he was very much a people's person. And I remember when he came back from the voyage, he would walk and pace in the morning, because he was so used to checking everything, if everything is in the right order. But Witold Czeholewski was actually the oldest of the group. He was 49, and he was the vice captain. You will talk about him, how knowledgeable he was, the most knowledgeable about geography and languages and so on. Then was Zygmunt Horeń, who was 32. He's foremost architect of marine architect, designer. He is still with us, and he is a wonderful friend of ours. Then was Bogdan Bergwin. He was the second officer. He's passed away. Kazimierz Kurzydło was the third officer. He was only 27. He's around. Stanisław Jakubczyk was he was the mechanic of the boat. He was 34. Then was Edwin Schoss and Adam Michel. They were both in their 20s. They were regular mates, just like our sister. However, our sister was, it was decided that she would be a cook on this boat, because everybody had to specialize. So she would cook for this crew of 8 men and herself, which wasn't easy. She learned as she went along. She didn't know how to cook especially well. Although those days we had to learn how to cook young. And then in every leg of the voyage, she would have 1 week off in order to learn the sailing craft. And then one of the boys, either Edwin or Adam or Stanisław, would take her place in the kitchen in the galley, right? So that was how they organized. Since it was a race, they had to have two very specialized teams of people to take the watches on and off for 4 hours, right, each. So so that's how it was organized. However, some moments were very, very difficult, and some moments were very easy, because it was easy sailing sometimes was very tough sailing. So would you like to talk about when it was tough?
Yes. So the leg from Cape Town to Sydney through the Southern Ocean, often considered one of the toughest, because the this area you're again closer to the South Pole, and the weather conditions are extremely tough. This area is called Roaring Forties because of the winds and the sea levels. So the winds would go to 60, 80, and sometimes even more in knots. This is the wind speed in knots, and that's almost a hurricane force, which means the sailboat would be tossed around like a toy in the water, and the water would be sometimes 20, sometimes 30 meters high of the wave. So they would they would go almost like surfers go in the if you think of big waves, where surfers go by the shore, let's say in Hawaii. They would do that for days at length, trying to be on all the time and keeping the sailboat upright, to make sure that they don't capsize. But unfortunately, they did capsize in the Southern Ocean.
And here we have the picture, right? We have some books here that Iwona and our dad wrote after the voyage, and this is our dad's book, which is called, in the Polish language, of course, it's called the Sailing Marathon. And what's on the picture here? It's that.
Yeah, so that's the picture after the capsizing, when they turned around. They were underwater for several seconds, and a lot of water got into the inside of the boat. They had to pump it out, and the second mast broke. So this is the picture after that second mast was just standing with no sails at that point.
And some boats, not all out of the 18 yachts, out of the 18 sailboats, some even of the great sailors, some boats withdrew from this race. But Otago, the Polish boat Otago, and the Polish boat Copernicus finished. So they fixed the mast in Sydney, Australia, of course with the help of the local shipyard. But they were thinking, what to do now, if they should continue,
Mm-hmm.
because the race, especially on that Indian Ocean and in those southern latitudes, was really extremely difficult. And I have a little passage here from Iwona's book, where Adam, the youngest after Iwona, where Adam says here, he often came up with all kinds of jokes. They all were, joking and keeping life light sometimes when it was tough. I'll tell you what's the worst prison: to lock up 9 people in a cage, 18 meters long and 4 meters wide, to pour water on them from above and below, and to give them some means of sustenance. So Iwona said this was Adam's aphorism from September 15th. So that was early on, and it got so much harder later on, especially that leg from Cape Town, South Africa, to Sydney, Australia. So now I would like to, we'll talk more about Iwona, her unique role in this, but since you've been sailing the whole time, even if it was just local sailing, you were telling me before this started today that sailing has changed so much since they were sailing, which was now this voyage was over 50 years ago, right? It was 52 years ago. So what's different? What's the difference between the sailing that happened then and now?
Well, incredible changes, because back then, 50 years ago, the sailing was really not tremendously different from the sailing methods of thousands of years when the sailing was first recorded, somewhere in the Nile Valley, where the first records of the sailing boats were recorded in our history. So with that, there was always a sail, a rudder of some kind, and it's a simple principle. With a sail, you with no other engine, you can go a long distance, but most of the sailing is limited in speed. It's usually connected to how long the boat is and how many sails you have. So with this round the world race, the sailing was still very traditional, and the maximum speeds were maybe in 15 knots, somewhere in that area. And the average, for example, for Otago, the average speed around the world was about 6 knots. The fastest sailboat in this was Great Britain 2, and maybe their average speed was around 8 knots. And they were the fastest. They finished the journey in 144 days.
Oh, maybe we can mention now who was first, who was the winner of this.
So the winner by speed was the Great Britain 2, captained by Chai Blythe, who was one of the most famous British sailors. But they had a handicap calculation for the length and the size of the sailboat, and in the end, Sayula 2 was a winner after the calculation, because they finished shortly after, but they were a smaller sailboat, and they were the overall winner. This was a Mexican sailboat. Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the Mexican sailboat. So we were talking about this just before this broadcast, and the captain and the owner was from Mexico, and he sailed with his wife and son, but the wife only stayed for one leg, and that was often the case, that women didn't stay for the whole. And not just women, but a lot of men didn't stay for the whole voyage. Just one leg was enough. So the winners had an international crew, which was kind of cool, because they had crew from all over the world, and they ended up being the winners, which in some way symbolically it rewarded sailors from all over the world. But the real winners were the people who completed this voyage, right? Anybody who completed the voyage, that told us was really a winner, and they didn't lose any of their crew members. So of course, out of the 14 that finished, Otago was number 13, and Copernicus was number 11. And then there was another boat that was called Peter von Danzig. It was a German student's boat. Do you want to tell us about that one?
Yeah, that was the oldest sailboat, built in 1936. So that's why Danzig was still, mostly German, even though it was a free city, but it was German speaking city, and they had that boat from way back, and they also sailed and finished, which is amazing because if you look at the picture of Peter Verdansing from 1936, and let's say Great Britain too, built in 1972. There were huge differences.
Like not just like one, but two generations of boats and people.
Right.
Right. So it's so much more modern than the.
But yet, so that's where that race started in 1973. But then over time, the decision was that it's such a good race, this should continue. And every 4 years, roughly, there was another race, and all documented in this book, but many other books as well. And as the races changed every 4 years, there was either a change of technology or change of the approach of how to select what kind of sailboat it would be. So initially, it was everybody could pick their own. That was the first race, 1973, and over time, they decided on having one class of a boat, same size, and roughly the same sail area, and pretty much similar to the design. So there would be no handicap, and it's just the calculation that basically they're equal to start with, and that meant that the competition shifted from instead of the size of the boat or the crew size to technology. And you asked before, how did that change? So with the first voyage and many after that, the technology was still very limited. There was no GPS.
Children, no GPS. How did they then tell where they were, and how did they find their place on the oceans?
So there was no way to tell where they were at. So
they had put it this little higher. So
they had to use old devices, like this is called sextant, which allows you to look through it and find the angle, for example, of the sun at noon to the horizon. So you line up by moving this mirror and the lens to see what's the angle of the sun versus the horizon. And with calculation, with different tables and adjustments, you can find your latitude with this device. So many people still use it because then they are not dependent on GPS or batteries. So
a solid tool.
Would always, you can depend on it. However, it was difficult when the sailboat was going up and down, big waves, or sometimes no sun because it's overcast. So you wouldn't be able to see the position easily. And that's one. Radio was another one where, right now we are so used to having a phone everywhere, and the technology is ubiquitous, where you can connect from almost any part of the world with the cell phone, with the internet connection. Back then, no internet, no cell phones, and they were just using ancient radio type of which was communication, which was very unreliable.
So yes. So I have here, this book, Otago na zdrowie, which is our sister's book, second edition, that she wrote before she died tragically. We didn't say that. Our sister completed this voyage, and then was only one of the 3 women who completed this voyage. But we'll talk about this in a minute. But I I have here in the translation that I did of our sister's book some fragment of how communication with home looked like, right? Because you were saying that it was so difficult to communicate at that time, right? They didn't have cell phones, they didn't have GPS. So they were communicating with Gdynia radio, which was...
That's the marine radio station in Gdynia, a port nearby where Gdańsk is, north of Poland. And they had this massive antenna and their equipment to connect with all the ships around the world, which were communicating with the homeland.
Yes.
However, it's very different when it's, let's say, a big ship with the big antenna, a lot of power, versus a small sailboat.
Okay, so this is the translation from our sister's book. Occasionally, we try to communicate with Gdynia radio. It looks something like this. The captain kneels in front of the two-way radio. Everyone kneels behind him. Edwin with the Bible. The captain joins his hands. The crew does the same. A minute of silence. The captain imploringly, Gdynia radio, Gdynia radio, Gdynia radio. This is Otago, Otago calling Gdynia radio. I'm listening on 8356, over. The ritual continues late into the night. Even if finally there is a connection, it's impossible to hear or understand much of anything anyway. The cliche sentences are humming. I'm healthy, I'm fine, how are you? How are the kids? How is the money situation? In the morning, there's the usual communication between the yachts. It's a lot of fun because some yachts cheat and give wrong position, except Pendik the 6, which has broken its mast, but we still don't know if it is going to Rio or Cape Town. Once Zyga, the captain of Copernicus, made 400 miles in 24 hours. But with his imagination, it is not hard to come up with something like that. So this is one example of how much technology they had. But the other ones were better equipped, more modern. But what we wanted to convey, and what our family and the crew of Otago told us, that after a while, it didn't matter how fancy your ship, your sailboat was, how fancy of a sailor you were. They all became comrades and friends. And especially with the Peter von Danzig on an old boat with students, they became especially close, even though, remember, they were from West Germany. That was before Berlin Wall, many years before Berlin Wall went down. They were good friends. So it shows you how through sport, how through traveling, people become friends. And even in spite of the differences in technology, they really bonded.
Right. Maybe even more, because then they were more dependent on each other. You mentioned that close communication worked better. So yes, the sailboats could communicate with each other. And then, maybe the best one would then communicate with the race control, which was the one keeping track of them. But again, they didn't really know exactly where everybody was. And when Sayula had its capsize, they lost all the navigation equipment.
So that's the boat that won.
That eventually won, but
Wow.
At that point they lost all the communications because everything stopped functioning. So they couldn't communicate and say where they are, and yet they obviously found their way to Sydney, and everybody was relieved that this they didn't perish somewhere. But just imagine the stress of organizers, other crews, and of course the families back home when sometimes for weeks they didn't have
Right.
any sign of life,
Right.
where everybody was. So that is very different than now. Let's roll back to now 2 years, but 2023, the last installment of the races. So the initial races were sponsored by Whitbread, the beer company in Great Britain. For many years, they were sponsors, and they called the race Whitbread Round the World Race, which after that changed to Volvo Ocean Race. Again, Volvo, the sponsor for many years, and recently, in 2018, it changed to just Ocean Race. So no specific sponsors.
No specific sponsors.
But many sponsors individually on different crews and different boats.
Yes.
And you can see that on the sales.
Wow.
So the last one in 2023, which was actually won by the American crew.
All right, bravo. We are Americans and Polish.
For the 11-hour racing.
Wow.
They were completely computerized, so every position was known to a meter, where every boat was. Satellite tracking, the sail position. Everything is being run by a computer. Actually, no more person actually steering the boat. It was being managed by the computer, because it actually, the latest sailboats are almost no longer sailboats. They're planes, because they're not in the water. They get above the water. They glide on foils. So the foils come down, and the sailboat is above the water for most of the journey.
Wow.
And then the speeds, because there's no more drag on the boat, the speeds are achieved double or triple, which was available back then. So the average speed is closer to 25 knots.
But wait a second, you said they're all of the same class boats, so they're all gliding, or just some? Because it wouldn't be fair to
of course,
the ones that are not gliding.
they all are foiling. And
the legs are just two, I heard, right?
No, the last one was actually more legs, because it was due to sponsorships.
Okay.
It was, starting from Northern Europe, then down for similar race, but then also stopping in Newport, Rhode Island, and then going to Mediterranean and finishing in Italy. So it was actually more stops to accommodate more countries and more sponsors, but actually faster. The whole race took 89 days versus before that 144.
Wow. Well, guys, we want to talk also about, so you have heard a lot about what happened and what's happening now, how these voyages looked like then and now. And, they happen about approximately about 4 years, every 4 years. And Kaz just told me they didn't happen during the pandemic, so they took a little break. But this program is also, or especially, focused on being. So why are we talking about them? Because they were very reflective human beings, and Iwona's book and Iwona's story is not just the doing and being in this voyage. Her book is very exceptional, not the only one. There were other sailors who were extremely reflective, but her book is sort of a journal that's very personal. And she read James Joyce, Ulysses. She read Proust, and she was sharing her books with the boys on the boat. And many of her moments that are described in the book are not just the doing, but it's the imagination. In a way, this first voyage around the world was kind of a crossover from the old sailing, like the old clippers in the 19th century, and early 20th century to these modern times. So I would like to share with you, for example, another little passage when Iwona talks about how she expected the tropics to be. So she talks a lot about her imagination and then how it really was. I expected that in the tropics it would be really hot. I was researching how it would be in reality. I was poring over the weather maps, and in my subconscious, I started to envision a pure hell. 70 degrees Celsius, 158 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, we have global warming now, so it's getting there, although it's now like 50 degrees. The deck is burning our feet. Fungi are growing on the leather objects. The cans with meat are swelling right before our eyes. The boat is not steering, the sea being like a mirror, the sky with not one cloud in it. We are running short on water. Someone is suffering from heat stroke. Everything is rotting. Salt has been laid out on the table, and every once in a while, someone licks it because due to perspiration, the loss of salt is tremendous. Everybody is lying down and licking. That would be some picture to behold. The helmsman's eyes are becoming bloodshot. The crew becomes emaciated. The tropical night is coming with no hope. The following day won't change anything. And you have this 18-year-old or 19-year-old, she turned 19, imagining all this. But then she says, nothing like that. Granted, it was rather warm. We were sunbathing on deck. We slept under thin sheets. But a breeze was pleasantly cooling us off, so the heat wasn't bothersome. Let's see. The sharks and dolphins were often accompanying us. The flying fish were frequently falling on board. The first whale was a huge attraction. There is even a mention in the captain's log. Date, September 9, 1973. Time, 10:05 a.m. We met a whale swimming on the northern course. Birds were constantly circling us. The albatrosses, young, dappled, dark, and gray, and the adults, completely white and generally sizable and fat. I look there. It's supposed to be only water, but I see fish. So there were days that were tough, days that were more pleasant. What do you remember the most from Iwona's book, our dad's book, or from the stories we have heard, besides the capsizing?
Yeah, the calling Gdynia radio and trying to connect back with Poland. That's also one of my favorites. The one you read, but another very engaging part of their journey was when they stopped in Rio de Janeiro, and that was during the carnival time, and they actually participated in the carnival. They watched the big crowds and all the parades on the street and music, and that was amazing, very colorful experience from both the stories and what's written in both books. So I enjoyed that very much. Almost thinking of being there, and of course that repeated in many other movies, including the James Bond movies, when they have the carnival there.
Yes. Or the Black Orpheus, which is a very famous, beautiful, classic film. The tragedy for our family was that Iwona, in March of 1975, so in a year after, less than a year of completing the voyage, died in a tragic car accident. So she never even made it to her 20th birthday. It was very close, but she never made it to her 20th birthday. So that's one of the big, I guess the biggest tragedy in our life for our family.
I was 10 years old at that time.
Kaja was 10. I was a few years older. I was the middle kid. And unfortunately, also the Otago itself perished in 1976. We had a very young captain, so the boat was sunk by this inexperienced crew. And there was a boat.
But they did not die.
They did not die, luckily. Knock on wood. And also there was a boat named Iwona Pienkawa after our sister, and the captain was inexperienced, trying to go around the world. And that boat, he survived, but the boat was lost. I mean, it was kind of like a phantom floating around somewhere near the coast.
He was taking water, and they were rescued off the boat, and they couldn't continue because the rudder wasn't working. So they left the boat, but yes, in the end, that journey didn't finish well.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So anyway, we want to talk a little more about being also, but we wanted to tell you guys that Iwona, as far as we know, was the youngest participant of this voyage. If we're wrong, please give us the info in the comments below this video. But she was the youngest, and she was one of the 3 women who were the first to sail around the world with a crew. So they completed this voyage around the world. It was with a crew, not solo, but they were the first 3. And there was Wendy Hines from Great Britain, and Zara Pascoli from Italy. She was from Tauranga. Wendy Hines was from Second Life. And Iwona Pienkawa, 19 years old when she completed this voyage, who participated in the whole race around the world. So that's something we're very, very proud of. Since then, since 1973-74, there was no other Polish or Central European boat that completed the whole voyage around the world. Of course, there were some independent sailors, and solo sailors. In fact, our sister was planning to be a solo sailor around the world before any other woman attempted. So we were sure she would be the first one ever. But of course, since she died tragically in March of 1975, she didn't have a chance to sail around the world solo. But the organizers honored the 3 women. Zara, Wendy, and Iwona received a special prize. Each one received a special prize from Prince Philip. And of course, that was a huge honor. Of course, this is not to diminish any of the incredible accomplishments of the men and boys on all these boats. That was an incredible voyage for all of them, and each one of them had their own personal inner journey too. So we don't want to diminish that, but we wanted to underline the fact that Iwona was the first from Eastern Europe, the first in the world, along with Wendy and Zara, and the youngest, as far as we know, the youngest ever. Going on that route, in that voyage, in that race around the world. Did you want to add anything, Kaja, about the facts still before we just talk about the?
Yes. So this was incredible, the first time conducted race, and that's why a lot of people learned what this was about. And one of the sailors, since you mentioned women, but one of the young sailors back then was Peter Blake, originally from New Zealand, but on a British sailboat. One of the most famous sailors who then sailed many times around the world in different races. And in one of the races he won. He was the captain who won the race. But here's his short reflection.
Go
Talking
ahead.
about first a little quote: "There's no limit to the adventure or fun," says Peter Blake, and here's his short description of the experience. "You slide back the hatch. Huge breaking seas come marching up from behind. It's bitterly cold, -5 degrees Celsius. The hatch slams, and our watch are it once more. The yacht is on the verge of being out of control. It requires two sets of hands to steer. The spray is turning to ice particles, and the deck is covered too. It is bitterly cold. The hardships in the Southern Ocean are very real. At times you are frightened by the sheer isolation, but at others elated at seeing nature in the form that most will never believe possible. It is the experience of a lifetime. It's one you get to hate, but learn to love at the same time. It was a major part of my life that I will never forget nor regret." Peter Blake, being also a man seeking the adventure, sailed many times, but then he went up the Amazon River on an expedition, and he was shot by the local pirates near the river, and he perished early, being 53 at that time.
Wow, wow. Well, we're talking about real adventurers and real, people really seeking adventure no matter what. And that's how Iwona was. And we have to also give credit to everybody behind the scenes who made this possible for our family and the other crew members who supported them. We're very grateful for that. Although Polish nation didn't quite support the Polish crews the way the British. They talked about how each British sailboat had their patrons among children who were sending them pictures and encouraging letters. So in Poland wasn't quite that, but when they met a Polish ship, the Polish ship members, seamen would help the two Polish boats, and also the people in Poland supported them, which was, a very unusual enterprise at that time.
Right, and then all the ports where they visited, the Polonia, the Polish community in Sydney, in Cape Town, and Rio de Janeiro, they were not having many contacts with people from Poland because of Poland being behind the Iron Curtain at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And they were very welcoming. They were very warm, very supportive of trying to help them for whatever they could have done, and that was
yes, and bringing some of the Western ways, like Iwona. They bought Iwona beautiful party gowns, and shopped for her, took care of her like their own daughter. But Iwona now talks in her book about how she threw all these gowns overboard because she was a sailor. Poland was different. I would tell our children that we didn't admire money, and we didn't admire being rich. I mean, we were a little bit admired a little bit. We were a little bit jealous of what they had, but it wasn't the main value. The main value was in Poland at the time, the way we grew up, was being hardworking, being a good friend to others, being a good person, who was doing something positive for the society. So it wasn't like we were, oh my goodness, the West is so lucky. Iwona and we were not like that. And we tell our children that that's not the main thing. Adventures, yes. Finding passions, yes. Our dad taught us that. But becoming rich for the sake of being rich, it wasn't our idea. And in fact, some of my friends say, well, you must have been rich, that you sailed, that you skied. No, people who were part of the yacht club were all doing their work. And they had to work in the yacht club to earn the privileges of using the sailboats, right?
Right. Yeah, it was the part of the community. You had to, very low dues, but you had to, help with maintaining sailboats, maintaining buildings, painting, renovating,
Right.
and training. So for those who are more experienced, training the next generation, young sailors.
Right.
Who were racing, so that was part of that community. And to your point, but money was scarce, but what was plentiful was nature. So the energy people would maybe spend in this country making money and building something, they would spend on getting together, going to the forest, maybe hunting,
Picking
maybe
mushrooms.
yeah, mushroom picking,
Yeah.
berry picking, and going to the sea or the mountains, hiking,
Right.
skiing, sailing on the lakes. So that was actually very common. It was, you didn't have to have a lot of money to do it. It
Yes.
was part of life for people who were outgoing and adventurous.
Exactly, and it's kind of coming back to that right now. The young generation is this millennial generation will be the first one who will not have as much money as their parents, and they really are collecting experiences, right? Not things. When we show our children, what we have in the house, they said, don't keep this. Why do you need so many things? But remember, we were raised by parents who were children in World War II, and there was shortage of everything during and after the war. So we were taught to, cherish all the objects we had. Right now, with the technologies that young people have, and with also, all the videos on YouTube and other places, they want to have experiences and adventures, not so much just collecting things. And actually, our parents were not into objects as much as experiences. Every Sunday, we would go on adventures. And remember, we didn't have Saturday off. So every Sunday, that was the day off from work. Our parents would take us sailing, would take us hiking, would take us seeing some friends.
Visit by the lake,
Yes,
river.
adventures, camping, all that stuff. In fact, when our dad came here, brought us to the United States, we didn't even speak English. We were, Kaja was a teenager. I was a late teen. And he took us to most of the national parks in America to show us the national parks, and also then took his friends and went on an adventure to Alaska. So he was always looking for adventure and taught us that. And you may wonder, why did we end up here? And that was also connected to our sister, because once Iwona died tragically in a car accident, our dad came to America to work in the World Trade Center, selling Polish ships to the US and Mexico and Canada, and presenting, the beautiful Polish ships to this part of the world. And by the way, he never joined the Communist Party, if you're wondering, because those days it was difficult to be a high-level manager without joining the Communist Party. But our dad was so good with people that he was able to kind of get to a high position, being friends with the with kind of all different people from all walks of life.
Right. Yeah, that was not easy. And since you mentioned the Communist Party at that time, that race like this, required some people who had to give a permission.
Yes.
And trust, that they would not escape, because there were many times where some sports people maybe would go for the Olympics or some other events.
Were trained in Poland but didn't come back.
They would not. They would go out to visit other countries or participate in a competition, but not come back. That was always the big worry of the political elite. That if you let sports people go, or people from theater or other professions where you visit outside of the country, then they may not come back, and there was always big stress.
Yes.
Should we allow it or not?
Right.
People could not hold the passport at home. You had to get a permission to receive the passport for a specific trip. It'd be issued for a period of time, let's say a month or two, and then you had to return it. So the travel was very limited, unlike here where you can travel in a day.
Right.
Go.
Right, but one of the biggest values that our father taught us was integrity. So when he came to America, it was for 5 years. And he, of course, got offers from other ship builders and ship brokers to stay here. But he had the trust of the Polish people, the Polish government, the family, and he said, "No way! I'm not gonna sell my soul for money." And he went back to Poland and gave up his official passport. So we talked a lot about the voyage and our dad, and whose name was Zdzisław Pienkawa and nickname Zbyszek, and about our sister Iwona Pienkawa. But you, Kaz Pienkawa, you have sailed quite a bit. What do you remember from your sailing journeys the most?
So my sailing was nowhere near what this race was about. Obviously, it was not around the world. My longest journey was crossing the Atlantic, and I remember this very well because the weather was pretty intense. It was very strong wind and big wave, and I remember thinking at some point where this relatively small sailboat was in the middle of the ocean, maybe 2,000 miles to land, and 2,000 miles of water below, middle of the Atlantic, and this connection to the universe, where you have this sailboat just using wind and the stars above, the spray of water in the face. It's very moving experience of being connected to the world this way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Wow. Were you ever scared to lose your life, or to feel your smallness and kind of feel this could be it? Or?
No, not scared, because the boats are made really well. I mean, unless you crash somewhere, mm-hmm. or hit the iceberg or land. Mm-hmm. Most sailboats are designed to survive even big waves and wind. So that did not worry me that somehow we would be lost at sea. But I like this connection to mm-hmm. unite with the universe, mm-hmm. Because of being in the middle of nature like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, and that's something that a lot of sailors mention, that after a while they have enough of being being the being on land, being the rats on land, right, and going to unite with nature and being at the mercy of nature, but also their skill and collaboration with their if they are not sailing solo, collaboration with their mates on the boat.
How about you? You also sailed quite a bit. Do you have your favorite experience?
Well, I remember two. One of them was when we were young and we used to go sailing with Dad and Mom. You were too young, and our sister and also their friends on the Adriatic. And it was also such a beautiful part of the world. And
the old Yugoslavia, right?
The older former Yugoslavia before it split up and before the war there. But just, growing up basically on, it was just a couple of weeks, but we were just spending all the time in the water, using our imagination, imagining, Treasure Island, imagining that under the water was our kingdom with my friend Dorota, and imagining being an explorer. So that's one wonderful memory. And I remember that our sister Iwona wasn't dreaming like me and Dorota. She was sailing, she was practicing swimming, like everybody would go to swim for pleasure, and Iwona would practice going 100 times across bay, small bay, back and forth to exercise.
And she'd also dive, like pick up things from the bottom of the sea.
Right. But she also did some embroidery, and that Dad got mad at her and threw that embroidery outside. He said, "You're not a sailor. You're not like the seamstress. You should be paying attention to sailing." And she dove in and got that piece of embroidery back, which caused our dad to derank her, and she became just a regular mate, not an officer. So
because she jumped overboard.
Overboard where there were sharks, and it was very dangerous what she did, but she was a daredevil. And then another time I remember with our neighbors Mikey and Robert Cutting, and Arnie and Alex and Jared, Mikey and Robert's son. And I was a first officer sailing in the Caribbean, and I realized that I really knew much more than I thought, because our dad was a good teacher and a trainer. And really it was very different than a lot of Americans who sail for pleasure, who learn how to sail, who love sailing, but they were not trained under such rigid discipline. So all these lessons, the way we were taught, came back to me, which was kind of cool, because Robert, a captain, and me were a good combination in terms of bringing different things to the table. So he had a lot of experience, but I also had like a lot of lessons that I would bring up. For example, like you have to do a man overboard maneuver. You have to have everybody during bad weather wear life vests, stuff like that. So it was kind of cool to feel that I'm part of this sailing tradition that our father and sister.
We also had a big library of sailing books, which this book by our father is part of it, but that's where all the different sailors were translated into Polish, and they this series was very popular, published in Gdańsk as well. So this maybe you can attach this as well.
Yes, okay. And guys, the fact that Poland got more access to the Baltic Sea after World War II. We had Gdynia, but then we had also got the Free City Gdańsk after the war. It inspired many of Polish young people to become shipbuilders, to become sailors. And that was the case with our dad, who came from the Warsaw area, and our mom, who came from Warsaw to become an architect, and our dad to become a naval architect and shipbuilder to Gdańsk. So we're very rooted in that area, very proud of our roots. But, to wrap things up, I would like to talk about how we're all journeying through life. That in a way, our life is like this, maybe not a race, but a voyage through time. And we learn new things as we come to different milestones, like they came to different ports, the 4 ports that they had. And we have our major changes in life, major obstacles that we overcome or not. So this episode was very different because we talked about the voyage around the world, but we hope that the viewers will each pull out something that's meaningful to you from our story, from our life, from our historical perspective on the family members who are so dear to us. I don't know if there's anything else you would like to add, what you think they would say to us about this race or about life in general.
They were definitely changed after the race. I noticed my sister was more interested in what I was doing. Before maybe there was the big age difference. She did not talk to me much because she was always busy. But this being away for so long, I think it changed her in some significant way. And my father also was, a changed man because of this experience and because of the pressure to bring everybody safely back home, and having to live through those extreme conditions, often called the Mount Everest of sailing. That got him to maybe appreciate also life at home and friends and family more, and that was very profound how this affected them.
Yes, it really softened them. And I remember Iwonka said that felt that being well known, being famous, means nothing in comparison to one's important relationships, the closest people. And I think that's why she always adored you, but she probably was talking to you more because she realized that our loved ones, our closest ones, are the ones who count, and that these adventures are exciting, wonderful, but that real life is with our loved ones, with our closest ones, and also I think inside us, how we view what's happening to us and people around us.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a good moment to finish. Hope you viewers enjoyed this, and we hope that maybe one day we'll meet again like this and talk again, but this was our first attempt to share the memories of our loved ones, Iwona and Zdzisław Pienkawa. We hope our kids and maybe grandkids one day will be able to watch this. And thank you all the viewers for spending this time with us. We very much appreciate. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.